My name is Bronwyn Agrios. I'm an instructor with the Educational Delivery Team here in Redlands, California. Joining me today is Anthony Burgon, the Program Manager for ArcMap Development. We want to welcome you all to today's live training seminar. The three topics we'll be covering today include interacting with the map interface, displaying data, and a quick section on ARC catalog and documentation. Each topic will be followed by a software demonstration, a review, and a question-answer session. And I encourage you all to send in your questions either about the slides or the demonstration. Now, before we get started with the seminar content, I'd like to do a review of some of the goals that ESRI has had for the desktop software at 9.2. The main focus of this desktop software has been to create a more productive working environment by building a consistent look and feel between desktop applications and making common functions more accessible, as well improving the overall usability by thinking about workflow and job-related tasks. Let's get started now interacting with the map interface. In this section, we'll look at navigating the map display and some options to allow the ArcMap user to interact and investigate through the display more efficiently. As well, we'll explore the improved Tools toolbar, looking at both new additions and changes to tools we use on a daily basis. Now, keeping with the goals of the desktop product for improved productivity and usability, there's now many options for navigation within the interface, including using the mouse wheel and shortcut keys. This allows you to pan and zoom without changing the tool you're currently using. For example, if I'm working with the interactive selection tool and need to pan, I can hold down the C key and the cursor will change to the pan tool. Or, if you need to zoom in the middle of a select operation, roll the mouse wheel towards you. Doing many manual zoom and pan operations can affect work productivity because we're waiting for the display to redraw. So when possible, use multiple viewing windows when you need either a snapshot of an area or need to investigate your map at a large scale. For example, when I'm editing, instead of zooming into an edit and then zooming out to my area of interest to see where I am located, I suggest using viewer and magnifier windows. A viewer window is a new addition to the ArcMap interface and allows me to take an independent snapshot of a portion of the map display. Notice in the slide graphic, I have a central display of Australia and the South Pacific Islands. There's also two large-scale captures. Now, these will not dynamically update when the window is dragged over the main display. But if there is an edit made in either the viewer window or the main display, both windows will be updated. I've found that the viewer windows are great as a reference because I can take a snapshot of a region and then move that region out of my main display. Magnifier windows have been improved. There's more options for navigation and interaction with the main map display. The window will update when it is repositioned, as it always has. A good workflow that I've found is to open a magnifier window, position it over my area of interest at a desired scale, and lock the view in place by converting it to a viewer window. So some more options for working with the scale of my data and controlling the visibility of the layers at different scales. I can do this when working with the customizable scale control and scale-dependent display. The customizable scale control is easier to work with because I can add in non-custom or unique scales, non-standard or unique scales. As you can see in the slide graphic, I've entered in a unique scale and now will be available to me from the drop-down always. Setting scale-dependent display for a layer does improve its draw time by reducing clutter and by limiting the information drawn until it is meaningful to the display. So we can now move directly to the map scale at which the layer was defined to be visible, eliminating the step of going to the layer properties and finding that scale. So you can see in the graphic, I've right-clicked the layer and said zoom to make visible. And this will take me to the scale at which cities was defined to be visible. Right, finally, on the Tools toolbar, there's been a lot of added functionality and changes to tools we use on a daily basis. The Zoom to Full Extent command is now customizable, and we can define how large or small we would like this full extent for a single data frame to be. Clear Selected Features is now available directly on the Tools toolbar. And like I said earlier, there's more options for navigation and selection within ArcMap, including to navigate to and select features that were identified inside the Find and Identify dialogues. Something you've been asking us for is a tool that will allow me to enter an XY value and then zoom to that value or identify its position all outside of an edit session. So we can do this with the Go to XY button. I can enter an XY value, identify its position by flashing it, and even create a point graphic. And I'll show you how to do this in the demonstration. Finally, we have an improved measure tool. We can change the measurable units on the fly, make measurements of distance, take an area, and take measurements of a feature. I'd now like to get right into a software demonstration of what we've learned in this section. So this is the demonstration data that I'll be using for the course of the seminar. It is pipeline data for the United States. You can see with my Select Elements tool highlighted, I'd like to navigate over to my area of interest. I can do that by holding down the mouse wheel, and notice my cursor changes to the pan tool, and simply dragging my whole display. I can also hold down the Z key, and notice again the cursor changes to the interactive zoom in tool, and I can zoom in closer to my area of interest. Now, I don't think I'll be working beyond this scale, so I'm going to change the extent of my zoom to full extent through the data frame properties. So I'll right-click data frame properties, and on the data frame tab, choose Other on this bottom frame. When I specify extent, I will choose Current Visible Extent, and just say OK to both those dialogues. Now when I choose the Zoom to Full Extent button, this is the extent that I will be taken to. Now for the purposes of my project, I'm going to be working with this proposed pipeline that you can see highlighted in red, or symbolized in red. And the scale I'd like to work with that at is 1 to 1,150,000. And I don't see that on here. So what I'm going to do is customize the list and enter that value in. And say Add. And now that will be available to me from the drop-down. So in this proposed pipeline, you can see it's symbolized in red, and I also have proposed meters symbolized in this red marker symbol at the end of the segments, although I have 1 meter missing. So I'd like to investigate the area a little bit more closely. First thing I'm going to do is open up a viewer window to create a static snapshot of my area of interest, my proposed pipeline. So I can do that through Window, Viewer, but another way we can do that is by opening up a custom tool available from the Customize dialog. So by double-clicking, by right-clicking and choosing Customize, I can click on Commands, and there's new functionality in here now that will allow me to search all these commands. This is going to be a big time saver. So by typing in Viewer, selecting Tools, I can create this custom tool of Create Viewer Window. And this will allow me to actually define the shape of my window. So I'll create my window over top of my area of interest, resize it, and I'm just going to take that and put it up in the corner as a reference. Now I'd like to create a magnifier window and place that over top of my missing meter. So again, notice that my magnifier window does update its content when it's moved. So I would send some coordinates from the field, and I'd like to, before adding these values in as an actual entry in the database, I'd like to make sure the XY values I was sent from the field are in the accurate location. So I'm going to do that using the go to XY command. Now I stored these values in a text file, so I'll just copy those values out. Now I can flash its position, and that does give me an indication both in the magnifier and viewer windows that the X and Y coordinates are in the right location. So at this point, I'll just add a point in there. And just a reminder, this is just a graphic point. I haven't actually changed anything inside the attribute table or database. Now lastly, I'd like to show you the new measure tool, because it does have a lot of more, it has become a lot more usable. You see now that I have a dialog that I can work with, as well as some extra buttons where I can take the measurement of an area, of a feature. I can snap to certain features. I can take summaries. And one of the best enhancements to this tool is being that I can change the units on the fly. So you can see that my map is stored in decimal degrees. Well, I prefer to take my measurements in kilometers. So I'll change the units to kilometers, take a measure of a feature, and just measure this segment. And you can see that the dialog updates. I no longer have to look down in the status bar for this value. So in this section, we covered some new functionality, including map navigation and shortcut keys, map navigation using shortcut keys and the mouse wheel, as well as that new viewer window that takes a static snapshot. We also learned about the zoom to make visible command, and the clear selected features is now on the tools toolbar. And I demonstrated for you the new go to XY button. Some enhanced functionality is the magnifier window that we can customize our full extent and use the identify, find, and measure tools with a little bit added functionality. I'd now like to pass this over to Anthony to answer some of your questions.
Thanks, Bronwyn. We have quite a few questions coming in already, so keep the questions coming. First question I'd like to answer is from Jason in Millersburg. Does the customize and scale settings apply to the current map only or all maps? Well, essentially the scale settings, when you customize the scale settings, that's saved for the particular machine as a registry setting. It's not saved with a map document. Next question is from Joseph in Tulsa. You mentioned that the go-to-XY can be used in an edit session. Can it be used outside an edit session? Yes, it can. In fact, we see most people using it outside an actual edit session. Next question from Theshan, hopefully I got the pronunciation right, from Ottawa. Does my ArcView code VBA in 9.1 still work in 9.2? Do I need to make any change on 9.1 code after upgrading to 9.2? Essentially, your code should work. If there have been some changes to any objects, they'll become very apparent when you recompile it. Essentially, you only need to change any kind of references to the objects that have been made. So The top of the code is where you'd make these changes, not actually in the functionality of the code. Kimberly from La Mesa asked this question, will a custom, actually I've already answered that question, the custom scale is actually saved on the computer as registry settings not within the map. Questions from Matthew in Northfield. Can you add the results from either the magnifier or viewer window to the map layout? Actually, what you would do is you would add the data frame to the layout, and you can synchronize the view extent of your viewer window with the actual data frame, which will then be replicated in the map layout. Question from Jose Ricardo from Guatemala. Does ArcGIS 9.2 support real-time GIS? Yes, it does. We've supported using real-time GIS since 9.0. There's a GPS toolbar, and you can set up real-time connections. Last question for this session, of this part, is from Vihar in Hobart. When will ArcGIS 9.2 desktop be released? We are currently in the mode of freezing 9.2. We hope to have it shipped by Q4 this year, and so far we're looking like we're hitting those targets. Back to you, Bronwyn.
Thanks, Anthony. I'd like to get right into our second section here, looking at displaying our data. This section will focus mainly on enhancements to working with tables, graphs, as well as new cartographic representations. To begin, though, I will briefly touch on improvements to working with editing, labels, and annotation. One of the things I've noticed about working with ArcMap over recent releases is that editing is becoming very attribute-driven. We're given many opportunities to fill in attributes during edit operations. A good example of where we see this is working with domains and subtypes in the geodatabase. Creating a feature and its attributes at the same time can be very useful if you're creating new features that are attribute-driven. For example, creating a feature to represent an 18-inch ductile iron water main, you will now be able to create the feature and enter these attributes in one step by changing the setting on the editor options. You can see it here, display the attributes dialog before storing the features. So when I add a new feature, or make a geometry edit, the attributes dialog will automatically pop up and prompt me to fill in the attributes for that new feature. And after I've said OK to this dialog, both the attributes and the geometry will be stored. You'll also notice a few changes to some tools for editing, including the copy parallel tool, the construct features tool, as well as the split and divide. There is an entire new suite of coordinate geometry, or COGO, editing tools as well. Now, one of the reasons why we are so concerned with having complete attributes is so we can have a complete set of labels for our features. On the Label Manager, there's a new Summary button. The dialog for the label summary keeps track of all the settings that have been applied to my labels, including rules used to generate placement. The dialog will point out potential problems with your labeling rules that may impact labeling performance, map readability, and the ability to convert labels to annotation. As well in the Label Manager, you'll see a new expression dialog. It's much easier to work with, I've found, because my field names are now listed in one long column, so my long field names are not truncated. But I'm also given the opportunity to work with field name aliases rather than the real name. I can also sort the field ascending and descending, show and choose to not show hidden fields. So the format of this dialog does persist throughout the interface, wherever there's a list of fields to work with. For example, with the Select by Attributes dialog. Finally, with this topic, there's been one big change to annotation. We can now append feature-linked annotation classes together. Now moving on from looking at attributes to looking at how we work with our tables. There's been a lot of improvements to actually how we work with tables, including with navigation and interaction, both at the field level and the row level. So you can see in the dialog that I can click and drag on the left-hand side of my table to select multiple rows. I can also click a field and drag it into a new position. So just a reminder, when I'm doing this outside of an edit session, I'm only changing the view of my table, not the actual table structure or schema. Like I said, we do have more control of the row level interaction in my table. So I can right-click a row and choose to flash, zoom, pan, identify, or make selections, as you can see in this context menu here. So again, that's brand new, and I found that to be extremely useful. A couple new things with the field context menu is that the field calculator has been renamed from calculate values, and there's a new calculate geometry command, which allows me to calculate fields that will be populated with area and length values. Now this is really useful when working with shapefiles, as shapefiles do not automatically maintain these values, as do the geodatabase. Now, in keeping with the theme of usability, we can now work with Excel tables directly from ArcGIS, both ArcMap and ArcCatalog. Excel tables are useful for imports into geoprocessing tools as well as for joins in ArcMap, but they are only read-only inside of an ArcMap session. Finally, we can print tables directly from Table View. This allows us to get a quick look at the current view of my table without having to produce a report or add the table to a layout. So the table will be printed exactly how it appears on screen, with the current font size and color as it's specified in the appearance dialog. So there is an advanced options in your printer settings that will allow you to specify a range of records, fields and column headers, and as well page headers. So one of the things that we've been looking at that makes ArcGIS so powerful is the underlying database and table of attributes that we use to describe our data. Now, one of the ways we use this underlying information to describe our data is with graphs. There's a brand new graphing engine in ArcGIS 9.2. So we use graphs to show the distribution and relationship between values. So notice in the slide graphic, we now have a clear preview of our graph, as well as the option to show labels, to add a legend, and some more options for color, including to color match with our map. We also have the option to display multiple feature classes or fields in a single graph. So you can see here that I have one series, as we call it, displayed for population. But by clicking this Add button, I can choose to add in more series or functions that will put extra information on my graph. So before you start creating a graph, it's good to know what type of information you want to display. Do you want to look at trends, relationships, distributions, or proportions? So knowing this will help you select the appropriate type of graph. So one new option in the graphing engine is to use a histogram. Histograms display a frequency distribution, or a range of values is split into equal size classes, and for each class, the frequency of the value determines the bar height. Now, if you're used to working with your data displayed in quantitative methods, then working with a histogram won't be new to you. A box plot is another way to graph our data. Now, this isn't new with the graph with 9.2, but I just wanted to highlight it as an effective way for examining our statistical distribution of our values between different data sets. And of course, all of our old graph styles are still supported. So the biggest change that I've noticed in graphs is the amount of interaction that occurs between my map display and the graph. So I already mentioned that we can color match between the graph and the map display, but we can also make selections in the map display and have it highlighted in the graph, and vice versa. So finally, although graphs are very intuitive and powerful on their own, paired with animations, they can add a whole other level to exploring our data and visualizing the results. Animations allow us to model time series, like tracking hurricane paths, mapping the progression of wildfire, and examining ozone changes through elevation levels. At 9.2, we have the ability to create animations, and this has been added to the core ArcMap functionality. So provided you can use this provided you have data with a temporal attribute. So before looking at cartographic representations, I'd like to do a demonstration on the information we've just talked about here. So here's the demo data as we left it in the last exercise. If you remember, I put a graphic point here using the Go to XY button. Now, because we've secured that this is the actual position of this nometer, I'm going to, in an edit session, create an actual feature at this location. So I've already set up my edit session by starting an edit session and turning on snapping for my proposed pipeline for the end features, and ensuring that my task and my target are set appropriately. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete the graphic. And notice, again, both my magnifier and my viewer window are updated. So before getting into the editing, I'd like to show you that setting that we looked at in the lecture. It's how we can have the attributes dialog pop up immediately. So you do that through the editor options, choose attributes, and then choose display the attribute values dialog before storing new features. And you can see I have the option to have it pop up for all my layers or just for the layers that I've identified. I'm going to have it pop up for all my layers. And again, I'm going to make the edit inside my magnifier window. So I'll choose my sketch tool, and you can see that I have snapping turned on, that my mouse does jump to the end of this pipeline. But just to ensure that I'm entering the meter in the correct position, I'm going to right-click, choose Absolute XY, and just double-check that these are, in fact, the right values. When I hit Enter, my Attributes dialog pops up immediately, and I'm prompted to fill in these values. Now, I'm not going to go through and fill in all these values for the sake of time, but I am going to change this rule ID to Rule 1. And I'll talk more about that attribute when we look at cartographic representations. So when I click OK to this dialog, the feature is added to the attribute table and stored in my database. So now let's have a quick look at the table for proposed meters. If I highlight the table, I can press Control-T to open the table up. Now, I don't need all these fields that I have displayed here. So I can either double-click this field name, MSID, to hide it, or I can right-click and say Turn Field Off. So I'll do that for this lease flag as well. This just helps me to clean up the look of my table. And I haven't actually removed these fields. I'm just removing them from the view. I'd also like to take this F name and move it up to the front because it's a field I'm going to be using a lot. So you can see that I can click one of these gray bars over here and drag to select multiple fields. That is new functionality. As well, I can right-click a field and get this context menu. Again, this is brand new. So then I can press Control T again to shut my table. So let's have a quick look at graphing now, before we move on to looking at cartographic representations. So I'll open up Tools, Graphs, so we access it from the same position as we did before. And I'm going to open up a graph that I've already created. So you can see that I've got a graph of my proposed pipeline segment lengths, and it's colored just with random symbology. So why don't we open up the properties and have a look at some of these values. So it's a vertical bar graph that you can see, and the field is shape length, and the color is symbolized in palette or palette modern. So let's look at what my other options are. I can choose a custom color, or I can choose to color match with my layer. So that's what I'm going to leave it on. And then if I click on this Advanced tab, I can choose to have currently selected features highlighted. So I'm going to leave that turned on as well. So my graph did change to match the red of my proposed pipeline. And have a look in the viewer window as well as in the main display. If I highlight some values in here, they're highlighted in my display. That viewer window needs to update. There we go. So I just did a quick F5 to update the viewer window. Oops. Okay, I'm going to move on to cartographic representations now. And we're done with this map document, so I'm just going to shut it and choose not to save any of my edits. So cartographic representations are brand new with 9.2. And I will cover some of the basics of the new technology here, but be sure to check out the live training seminar happening on October 12th that focuses for an hour on cartographic representations. So cartographic representations, also called just representations, are a new way to work with our symbology. With this new technology, you can use symbols to create a representation of your features that will be stored in the features table within the geodatabase, not as a property of a layer in the map document. This follows the trends that we've seen for data storage that the geodatabase data model has provided for us. We can liken the storage model for representations to that of domains and subtypes, which are stored as geodatabase and feature class properties. So notice in the table on the slide, I have an attribute table for a roads feature class. When the symbology of a map layer is converted to representations, two columns are added to the feature class table, rule ID and override. If you recall back to when I was editing in the last demonstration, rule ID is the one field that I did change. Now the values in this table are managed from the layer properties either in ArcMap or the feature class properties in our catalog. Again, because representations are stored in geodatabase tables, changes made to representation symbology are reflected in all map documents that display that feature representation. Now finally, with representations, it is possible to change the position, shape, and size of the symbols in symbol parts without affecting my stored geometry. So compare the two images in the slide graphic. The one on the left shows line geometry for a stream. Although the stream's position is correct, the way it is symbolized is not that visually appealing. You can see I've got jagged corners here. The image on the right just shows the same stream, but with a representation applied. The curves to the stream symbol were added as a part of the feature's representation and have not affected the source coordinates. So now let's have a look at how we can use cartographic representations in practice. So this is the same proposed pipeline that I've been working with in the previous two demonstrations. I've had it symbolized with a dashed symbol, and I'd like to use a magnifier window just to show you a couple of the features. You can see at this junction, it's a little bit uncertain to how this junction or these two line segments actually meet up based on the position of the dashes. As well as on this corner, it's again a little uncertain to how these dashes curve around this corner. So I can take this symbology for proposed pipelines and convert it to a cartographic representation where I will have more control over how these dashes actually are represented. So I do that by right-clicking my layer and saying Convert Symbology to a Representation. Now for time's sake, I've already done this. So let's just go into the Properties. And we'll have a look at the Symbology tab. And at the bottom here, there's a New Representations. So let's click on that, and you can see when I apply the representation, an angle tolerance will be applied. So where there's an angle tolerance of, where there's an angle of 120, that dash symbol will actually curve around. And as well, my dash endings, I'll have more control over how those junctions actually end. So let's say OK to this. And remember, this is actually being stored directly in the geodatabase in my table. So have a look what happened here. That dash now curves directly around the corner. And these junctions actually end at a T. So we're not left with any question in how these things are ended, how the segments are ended. All right, so that was a good introduction to how we set up a representation. Now let's have a look at the data that we've been using. So I can hold down the Alt key and click my data frame to change data frames. That's a good shortcut to know. So here, I'm going to start an edit session. So because we are working with my table data, or my table values, I do need to be in an edit session. And another thing I need to have is my layers for my cartographic symbols set to be selectable, which I've already done for my proposed pipeline. So in this demonstration, I'd like to show you how I can edit the symbology at the feature level. So I'm going to change the symbology for just this branch of the pipeline. So I'll take my select tool and just draw a box around that symbol. Then choose the properties for that symbol. So I can turn the visibility of it off. So that part of the pipeline may not be built. But what we're going to do is actually change the color. So we'll select it again, and we'll change the color to a dark green. Shut that and say OK. So now this is being stored in my table for the feature class. Lastly, what I'd like to show you is how I can change a representation without affecting the source geometry. So let's open up another magnifier window and position it over this urban area at the bottom here. I'm going to select that urban area with the lasso tool. Notice when I draw a circle around that lasso tool, around that representation, I don't need to close the circle completely. It will select anything that intersects with the line. Now I'm going to take this and just move it over a little bit because my line widths have caused this urban area and my pipeline to intersect. and I want to make sure that my pipeline is the more accurate feature here. So it's the urban area that I'm going to shift a little bit. But again, remember, it's just the symbology that I'm shifting, which is noticeable when I turn back on my geometry. So in this section, we looked at the labeling summaries option and how we have increased row-level interaction in my tables. As well with tables, we have more support for Excel and the ability to print tables directly from table view. With graphs, we have improved interactivity between my graph and my map, as well as we saw the animations are both supported in my map and in my map data. And finally, we had a look at new cartographic representations. Some enhanced functionality is that my editing is now very attribute focused, and I have some improvements to my editing tools. There's a new label expression, a new format to the label expressions dialog, and I have improvements to working with feature-linked annotation. And of course, that Create New Graph wizard is new. So I'd like to pass it back over to Anthony to answer some of your questions.
Thanks, Bronwyn. A lot of questions coming in, so let's get to them. Billy from Washington. How you going, Billy? Can you still use layer files? In 9.2, layer files are still very important. Your 9.1 or 9.0 or 8.3 layer files and MXDs can be used within ArcGIS 9.2. Just to be clear, a representation is essentially storing the symbology within the geodatabase. You still need to use layer files to control the other aspects of a layer within ArcMap, be it the transparency, the actual visibility, the scale suppression, etc. Question from Jeffrey in Frankfurt. What license level is representations available at? At the ArcView license level, you can actually view representations, so the symbology can be represented. You cannot actually manipulate the representations at the ArcView license level. Representations are a advanced feature type within a geodatabase. It's essentially a property of a feature class. So if you want to edit it, you need an ArcEditor or ArcInfo license. The geoprocessing tools that work with representations are available at the ArcInfo license level. Next question we have from Jennifer from Meadows Place. Are cartographic representations available in both personal and enterprise geodatabases? The answer is yes, and also the new file geodatabase format. Question from Gary in Park City. Do representations work with coordinate systems or just geographic coordinate systems? They work with projected and geographic coordinate systems. So whatever your feature class is projected in, the representations will work in that actual projected feature, projected coordinate system. Why Vanessa from Cambridge asked the question, can graphs be exported? Yes, they can. They can be exported to a multitude of different formats. Metafiles, EPS, PDF, SVG, bitmaps, GIFs, JPEGs, and PCX. So there's a bunch of different types of formats they can be exported to. Another question from Y Vanessa in Cambridge. Can we control which layers are snapped to with the measure tool? Essentially, the measure tool will snap to the visible features that are in your map, in your data frame. So there's not the same kind of control of the snapping with the measure tool that you have, say, in the editing environment. Okay, next question. Alison from Riverside. Is 9.2 backwards compatible with maps created in 8.3? So if you create a 9.2 MXD, you can use the save copy as function to save it as an 8.3 type. Now the caveat is any new functionality that exists in 9.2, 9.1 or 9.0 won't be exposed. A good example of that is if you save a map document that has, say, a terrain layer in it in 9.2, when you open up that map document in 8.3, that terrain layer won't actually be able to be used in 8.3. Next question is Remy from Forest Park. Can the animation sequences be exported to other formats such as Flash or AVI? We don't actually export to Flash, we export to AVI and MOV file types. Next question from Donald from Gasquet. Do you need an extension like Tracking Analyst perform time series animations? No, you do not. Animation is available at all license levels, ArcView, ArcEditor, and ArcInfo. Next question, someone who's called themselves Mapping in Rochester. With the calculate geometry functionality, can you calculate centroids or obtain the coordinates of a point? Yes, you can. You can calculate the area, the centroid of the point. You can actually calculate in different coordinate systems as well. As part of the dialog, there's an option to select the coordinate system of the actual feature class that you're working with, or the data frame that the actual layer is in. Benjamin from Concord asks, will ArcMap support formulas in Excel? When you open up an Excel spreadsheet within ArcMap, it is a read-only table. Now, if there are formulas in that Excel spreadsheet, you will just see the results of the formula. You cannot edit the formula within ArcMap. Next question, Jason from Millersburg. When multiple rows are selected, can you remove a certain row without deselecting the other records? Yes, you can. We have the concept of a selected set at 9.2 with tables. Okay, we have a question from Will in Victoria. This is the last one for this section. If the field is moved to a new location inside an edit session, is the underlying table format changed? No, it is not. We do not edit the field values. You can edit aliases, and we do not change the actual structure of a table within ArcMap. We just change the way that it's being displayed in the table view. Keep the questions coming. Back to you, Bronwyn.
Thanks, Anthony. All right, for our last section here, we're going to look at some improvements to Arc Catalog and documentation. As well, I'll take you through a couple new additions to the Create New Feature class dialog. So there's a handful of additions to our catalog that I found that fit really well into my day-to-day workflow, including the ability to rename folder connections for better organization of long folder names. As well, the coordinate systems folder in the catalog tree now allows you to take frequently used spatial reference files like NAD83, UTM Zone 10, and store them in a top-level coordinate systems folder. So you no longer have to drill down through the folders to find spatial reference files you frequently use. As well, there's new options in the feature class properties that support the geodatabase feature class structure coming out at 9.2. You can see here we have a representations tab. As well, we have the ability to work with our coordinate accuracy using tolerance and resolution. So this information of tolerance and resolution is originally set when we're creating a feature class from scratch. So you will notice that the Create New Feature class dialog has changed. I found that it's a lot more intuitive and that it can accept the defaults in a lot of cases. So something we all do when we're creating a feature class is to forget to change that default geometry from polygon. As well, forget to change the spatial reference. Well, the dialogues are organized in such a way that we no longer really give you the opportunity to forget about setting these settings. As well, along the lines of accepting default values with XY tolerance, which, like I said, reflects the coordinate accuracy of my values, we do encourage people to just accept the defaults. Okay, now changing gears a little bit to look at documentation. The organization of the documentation has been changed quite a lot, and you'll notice that it is very workflow and task-oriented. This is reflected in the numerous diagrams and flowcharts that take you through a process from beginning to end. As well, we have some Flash demo tutorials that walk you through the steps of a task, showing you where to click and giving call-out explanations of what's happening. And finally, the search tab in the documentation has changed quite a lot. I found the search environment much easier to navigate, and the results I get back are quick and effective. I have the option to customize the search interface by choosing filters, as you can see here in the diagram. So in the search that I did in this search session, I searched on geodatabase, and the first two results I got back were getting started with the geodatabase and geodatabase architecture. All right, now getting into our last software demonstration. Before looking at our catalog, there's one thing in ArcMap that I want to show you, that we can now view our metadata directly from ArcMap. So I right-clicked the layer, went to Data, and said View Metadata. Now again, you can see that I can view my metadata from ArcMap very easily, but cannot edit it. So ArcMap, our catalog, is still our metadata editor. So from within our catalog, let's go ahead and create a brand new feature class. And I'll show you those new dialogues. So same way as we've always done, I can right-click, say New Feature Class. And I'm going to name it Pipe and Northwest. So in our catalog, the real name cannot have any spaces, cannot have decimal places or punctuation, as well as cannot start with a number value. Whereas the alias can have all of these things. And if you do choose an alias for your feature class, that is what will be used in ArcMap. So here you can see that I'm given the opportunity to choose the geometry of my features right on this first panel. So because we're working with a pipeline, I'll choose line feature, and next. Now I'm prompted to select a spatial reference. And again, you can see, because I'm working in the Northwest of the United States, I probably want to choose this NAD 83 UTM Zone 10 North. Well, I'm not asked to set my spatial domain when I'm defining my spatial reference. So we no longer have to set spatial domain with geodatabase feature classes at 9.2. But we are still given the opportunity to work with our coordinate accuracy using XY tolerance and resolution. But as you can see from the dialog, we do recommend that you choose the defaults. So if you'd like to do some more research into XY tolerance, something you can do is choose the help at the top here, and then click on the dialog, and it will give me some more information about XY tolerance. And you can see that the information given here is quite plentiful. So that functionality does work both on dialogues as well as on the tool and buttons. So almost anywhere you can click inside that dialog, you'll get a little bit of help. And the last thing we are asked to set is, of course, my table schema. Remember, you can import your schema from an existing feature class, and be sure to go ahead and set some default values as well as subtypes and domains for your feature classes, just to help feature classes while they're in production. So I'll choose Finish on there. So I'm just going to give you a quick tour around the help documentation. So we have a new search tab, and you can see just on the first look that the search environment does look much more appealing. As well, I've noticed that my returns on my searches are much faster. So I've already done a search on editing tutorials, and the first option here, editing geodatabase tutorial index, is what I'd like to show you. So I'll show you one of those flash demonstrations on creating polygon features and creating a new feature. So you can see that a little movie plays showing me the ArcMap interface, and a user is going ahead and creating a new polygon feature. So there's no audio for these, but I am given pop-up dialogues telling me what the user is doing. So we've covered a lot of information in this session, and you've had a lot of really good questions. But if you do have some more questions about 9.2, I encourage you to check out the ArcGIS 9.2 desktop help on the support site, support.esri.com. So you can get to it right from this featured area, or from the Knowledge Base tab, Web-Based Help, and ArcGIS 9.2 desktop help. And what I'd like to show you is this PDF. So click the What's New in ArcGIS 9.2, and then click here. We'll open up a 255-page PDF that goes into a lot of detail, both in the information that I've covered here today, as well as on things like the geodatabase and a lot of the new changes happening there. Terrains, which you heard Anthony mention, a whole section on cartographic representations. So it's a very complete resource. So some of the things we've covered here today in terms of new functionality have been that we can view metadata from ArcMap directly. As well, the documentation, search engine, and interface have been much improved. As well, we have documentation tutorials available to us. Some enhanced functionality is that we can rename folder connections in our catalog to make them easier to view. As well, the coordinate systems folder does have better organization as well, and the Create New Feature Class dialog box does reflect some changes that we've made to the underlying structure of the geodatabase. So I'll pass it over to Anthony for a few more of your questions.
Okay, we've got a few more questions here. Brett from Milwaukee asked the question, can you write to an Excel file? No, you cannot. We only read Excel files at 9.2. Jack from Fort Worth asked the question, can you export graphs automatically in Python script or from VBA? At 9.2, only from VBA. There are some SDK samples that are available, and we have exposed some ArcObjects to allow you to export graphs through VBA. Lydia asked a good question, can representations be stored within SDE and then be displayed with ArcIMS or ArcGIS server? To display representations through ArcIMS, you needed to use ArcMap server for ArcIMS because you're actually publishing the ArcMap document. Same for ArcGIS server. If you create a map service based on a map document that has representations in it, that will be able to be used within ArcGIS server or consumed by a client that uses ArcGIS server. Lisa from Ottawa, does the symbol representation get reflected in your map layout legend? The answer is yes. Tony from Calgary, a lot of Canadians today. Are multiple representations possible for a single feature class, for example, based on scale? Yes, remember when we refer to our reference scale within a map document, it's based on the data frame. So if you create a multiple representations for a feature class, it must be in relation to your reference scale for your data frame. Mary Beth from Lincoln, are the new table functions available for all data formats, not just geodatabases? The answer is yes. When you open up a table in ArcMap, we refer to that as really the table view, and all of these new usability enhancements are related to that table view, and it's not data specific. Matthew from Northfield, will my existing label expressions work with 9.2 or will I need to modify them? Your existing LXP files will work in 9.2. We've got time for one or two more. Deborah from Oldbridge, are the label and annotation enhancements available with an ArcView license? For labeling, yes. Labeling is available at the labeling enhancements are available at the ArcView license. For annotations, yes, but with the caveat that feature linked annotation is not available at the ArcView license level. All other annotation types are. Question here that Bronwyn wants me to answer. Can you edit in the magnify window? This is from Laurie in Washington. Yes, you can. That's one of the reasons why we built the magnified window, so you don't have to zoom into small areas to edit features. There is a question here from There's a Michael from Vancouver. How has working with PDFs changed? At 9.2, we did a lot of work to improve the way that the consistency or quality of PDFs are created. So some people have had some problems with fonts, and if you generally have problems with fonts, you probably should embed the fonts within the PDF as part of the export process. Another enhancement we've done is when you export a map to a PDF, you actually can see the map layers and manipulate the visibility of those map layers as layers within the PDF. Are there any more? There's a question here from Walter from Baton Rouge. When will metadata editing be available from within ArcMap? Not at 9.2, but we'll think about it. And let's have a look here. We'll go for one more. Let's have a look. Okay, there's a question from Teresa from Henderson. Are the new features and enhancements I will see today available at all license levels of ArcGIS? That's a pretty tricky question. What I suggest you do is go to the support site that Bronwyn displayed to you guys before and go through the what's new, and all of the licensing of the associated new functionality is pretty clearly articulated what you can do at which license levels. Back to you, Bronwyn.
All right, thanks, Anthony. All right, before we go, I'd like to point you to a few more resources. You've heard me mention that there's a couple more What's New in 9.2 live training seminars on the way. October 5th, there's an enhancements to ArcSDE geodatabases at 9.2. And as well, October 12th, Introduction to ArcGIS Cartographic Representations at 9.2. And be sure to check out that PDF on the 9.2 desktop help that I showed you can access from the support site. So once again, I'd like to thank you for joining us. Your comments do help us improve our seminars, so please take a moment to complete the survey. Just click the Give Us Feedback link and take the survey. We hope you enjoyed today's seminar. On behalf of the SRI, I'd like to thank you for attending.